Okay, in my last video, I reacted to Tucker Carlson's bemusement over the question of, does Israel have a right to exist? Now let's have a look at Mehdi Hassan trying to debunk this question of, does Israel have a right to exist? Same argument, very stupid, but you know, Mehdi Hassan, he always tries to be over smart. That's why it's going to be even more fun.
I have been debating hardcore Zionists, Israelis, supporters of Israel for years now, decades. And the conversation always comes back to one line, one phrase, one talking point. Do you or do you not support Israel's right to exist? You've all heard that line before, right?
There's nothing wrong with that.
The go-to move. If you don't support Israel's right to exist, you're an extremist, you're an anti-Semite, you want...
Exactly. If you don't support America's right to exist, then you're an anti-American bigot. You hate America. That's it. There's nothing wrong with it. So why can't Israel say that? Yes, America never has to say that because America carries a huge stick and clowns like you who hate America but still live in America. So there's nothing wrong with that. Again, like why do they think they have discovered a magic bullet? Like you have a right to exist. Yes, international law. That's why we have international law that this clown always hides behind.
To wipe Israel and millions of Israeli Jews off the map.
True.
Even many critics of Israel are often left frantically conceding, yes, of course I support Israel's right to exist, but you don't have to concede on this point.
If you are a true hardcore Islamist like this guy, by the way, this guy wrote How to Win Every Single Argument, okay? Such a stupid argument. How is it a bullshit argument? So let's have a listen.
It's a bullshit argument. Some of you may know I wrote a book about debating.
Oh.
And if you don't know, you know now. And today I want to share with you 3 arguments you can use if you find yourself stuck in a debate with someone who insists you recognize Israel's right to exist. Here's how you debunk their argument. Time for a debunking.
Oh.
Number 1, right to exist. Where does this right to exist actually apply? Because Israel is the only country in the world that refuses to define its borders. If you want me to...
That's not true. What do you mean? Yeah, they haven't formally annexed the West Bank or Gaza, but they don't lay any claim on that either. They gave away the Sinai Desert back to Egypt as a goodwill gesture. So that debunks the greater Israel theory because they could have tripled their landmass by not giving the Sinai Desert to Egypt. But that's not right, though. But there's so many other countries that have border disputes. Pakistan has a border dispute with India over Kashmir. It's called the line of control. We have another border dispute with Afghanistan. It's called the Durand line. But Afghanistan does not recognize the Durand line. And Pakistan says that we want to treat it like international border, but it's not an agreed upon position either. There's a dispute on that. North and South Korea, they have a dispute. So I don't know what does it mean by... Or China. I think China has border dispute with pretty much every single country. Yeah? China has border disputes with India, dispute with Japan. It has border dispute with Russia. I think it has border dispute with North Korea as well. China had a border dispute with Pakistan as well. So Pakistan just donated this region called Aksai Chin near Kashmir. So what do you mean is the only country that doesn't define its borders? How to win every single argument. What a clown.
Recognize Israel's right to exist. Does that right of Israel's extend into Gaza, the West Bank, the Golan Heights, East Jerusalem, all of which are considered illegally occupied territory?
Actually, no, they can be called disputed territories. Just like the UN call India and Pakistan is Kashmir a disputed territory. It's very difficult for them to recognize. So no, but that ambiguity is not extended to mainland India or mainland Pakistan where there's no dispute. So mainland Pakistan has a right to exist. Oh my goodness, this guy. How to win every argument, eh?
Jerusalem, all of which are considered illegally occupied territory under international law, and yet all of which are claimed by the current government of Israel as Israeli land.
No, it's actually not claimed Israeli land. No, it's not. Oh my God, he showed screenshots of extremists. This one and that one, Ben Gvir, he just showed his photo. So, okay, Ben Gvir believe in that. Yeah, right. Okay. So therefore, it's the Israeli state's position. Wow.
As Israeli land. So, right to exist where? Number 2.
Already answered. See, that was so easy. It's been debunked. Mehdi Hassan, you fool. You've been debunked so easily. Just because you have disputed territories, like India and Pakistan have a disputed territory, then that doesn't mean that the recognized part of Pakistan and India don't have a right to exist. They're recognized as legal, political, sovereign states, and they have a right to exist. Same logic.
What is this right to exist? Where does it come from? Because states don't have a right to exist. No such natural or legal right exists. People, individuals have a right to exist. Human beings have that right.
Okay, I don't think that's true. So I'm actually watching it live. I haven't thought about it. Okay, I just asked ChatGPT, what does the UN mean when it recognizes a country? So what does recognition actually mean? You know, we recognize you or we don't recognize you, okay? So when you recognize a country, then it means that we recognize you as a political sovereign entity and you have a right to exist just like us. That's what it means. This is what ChatGPT is saying. So what does recognition mean? For something to be a state in international law, it generally needs a defined territory, a permanent population, a government, the ability to conduct foreign relations. That's based on Montevideo Convention 1933, which is basically the unofficial checklist. We accept you as a legitimate member of the international system. So that's what Israel means. That, hey, does Israel have a right to exist, or do you recognize us as a country? These two are exactly the same things. But they're just, again, they're trying to pick holes into an argument just so they can strengthen their narrative, which obviously is irrelevant.
Not states, not countries.
They do. That's why we recognize them.
States change their composition, their governing structures, their ideologies, their regimes, their borders all the time.
Yeah, when they go into dispute with each other. So that's why the UN keeps on saying, hey, we encourage de-escalation, please don't fight. But the warring parties, they're fighting with each other because they're saying, hey, I don't now recognize you as a state, or I don't recognize this part of you as your territory. I recognize it as mine. So therefore, we're going to go to war. That doesn't imply Mehdi Hassan, the most clever debater. That doesn't imply what you're implying.
They're not fixed for eternity. The US...
What do you mean fixed for eternity? Let's listen to this point again.
Beings have that right, not states.
No, human beings don't have that right either. Why do human beings have the right? It's just recognition. The right means recognition. That's all it means.
Not countries. States change their composition, their governing structures, their ideologies, their regimes, their borders all the time. They're not fixed for eternity. The USSR broke up into Russia and 14 other new states. Yugoslavia
but
broke up into...
It doesn't negate the point.
Serbia, Bosnia, Croatia, and the rest. Czechoslovakia split into Slovakia and the Czech Republic. What happened to the USSR's right to exist?
They did. The USSR did have a right to exist, but that having a right to exist does not mean that you are immune from collapses or wars from neighboring countries. That's not what it means. A right to exist is a declaration of your position. Do you recognize the state of Israel? That's what they mean. They both have same implications.
Yugoslavia's or Czechoslovakia's. Think about it. Does the UK have a right to exist?
Yes.
And if so, does that mean Scotland, for example, can never vote for independence? Would we say to Scots who voted in a referendum to be independent from the UK, sorry, you can't leave? That would
No, the international community cannot say. The UN cannot get involved because it is a domestic matter. It is for the people of England and Scotland to work that out. That's what it means. The UK has a right to exist. Yes. Oh, my goodness.
Going against the UK's right to exist? Of course not. Be independent from the UK. Sorry, you can't leave. That would be going against the UK's right to exist.
As I said, the international community cannot do anything. And that's the reason why we don't have an international police. That's why America looks like the bad guy every time America sees that, hey, some serious injustice is taking place here and you also hate us. So therefore, I think it's a good opportunity to take you out.
Of course not. People have rights.
Well, no, why?
Not states.
Why?
To be clear, there is no right for countries to exist, nor for countries to continue to exist. None whatsoever.
Very easy for you to say, because your country's existence is not being challenged.
None whatsoever. And number three, last but not least, if there is a right to exist, as they claim, does Palestine have a right to exist?
That's your choice to make. There is a group of people who think, no, I actually am not one of those people. I think that there should be a two-state solution and be done with it. And I know it's not going to be done. Then they're going to come for more. And I understand the other side of the argument too. But no, that is a dispute, you genius. That is the actual dispute. The Israelis say, no, we don't think you have a right to exist as a sovereign state because you will launch attacks into Israeli territory. Very maximalist position that Israel has taken. But that is their position. So they say, no, they don't have a right to exist. That's why it's for you to say, be like Pakistan. No, we don't think that Israel has a right to exist. We don't acknowledge it. We don't recognize it. Yeah, we can't do anything about it, but we don't acknowledge it. That's what they mean. I think they got caught up with this recognition issue. And they thought that when you recognize something, then you can't go to war with each other. Yes, you can go to war with each other, because at that point, you're suspending international law. You're suspending the normal rules and regulations.
Because last time I checked, Israel exists as a matter of fact. It's a country with sovereignty. It's on the map with its undeclared borders. Over at the UN, it's Israel that's a full member state, not Palestine. And it's the US, by the way, blocking Palestine's right to exist at the UN as a full sovereign member state.
That's perfectly fine, as I said, because they agree with Israel and they don't think that Palestine has a right to exist, because it's going to cause more terrorism in Israel, a state that we recognize. So because we recognize, therefore, we're going to make sure that it continues to exist. That's why it's a very simple question, Mehdi Hassan. You should actually own it. And you said, no, you don't have a right to exist because we don't recognize you. I'm an Islamist and a jihadi. And if you're a woke lefty lunatic, then you say the same thing, that, hey, I don't think you have a right to exist because you have denied that right to the Palestinians. You can take that position. That'll be perfectly fine. This is why it's a litmus test for you. Let's see who you are. Are you a woke lunatic? Are you a jihadi Islamist? Or you are an ordinary Western person who says, yeah, I think Israel has a right to exist. And it's a position. So Mehdi Hassan, right means recognize as a state, like we have recognized so many other states. I don't know if you want to hear the rest of it. It's too long. So let's just wrap it up. So yeah, very stupid. I don't know. Yeah, is that even an argument? And this guy thinks how to win every single argument. My goodness, what a fool.